Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Michigan Wolverines pick up another commitment in the 2024 class from four-star edge rusher from the state of Maryland, Dominic Nichols. You're going to see the national ranking 433, the 28th best edge rusher in the class. There's a lot to like about Dominic Nichols, and it's a discussion we've had a lot in terms of what Michigan likes to do on the recruiting trail. They like to find their guys that they think are going to fit their system and get them in and develop them. And when you take a look at what Dominic Nichols brings to the table, and we're going to turn on the film in a little bit, you're going to see a guy that has long arms and very powerful hands. He's not the twitchiest. He's not the bendiest edge rusher like a guy that we just got last week in Devin Baxter, but he's a guy that's going to go right through tackles. He's phenomenal setting the edge in the run game. A lot to like about him. And again, not necessarily the flashiest commitment, but another very, very good player that's going to help this Michigan defense. And I'm just going to say it right now, Mikey Morris. He reminds me a lot about what Mike Morris brings to this Michigan defense. Before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support, especially from the Michigan fans, has been absolutely awesome. Y'all know I like talking recruiting. I rock with that Michigan team. So you guys have been awesome. I love talking about it. You guys have been awesome with the support. So if you do enjoy the updates, you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And for Michigan fans, I don't think we're slowing down anytime soon on the recruiting trail. So if you like the updates, lock it in. Let's start talking a little Dominic Nichols. And I'm going to take you right over to Mikey Morris when he was coming out. Also 6'5", 255 pounds from American heritage. A lot of like the similar measurables, right? You see similar national rankings, similar measurables. And when you turn on the film of Dominic Nichols, and we'll get to it right now, very similar game. And before we get into it, I kind of just want to talk about like these kind of players from Michigan that, again, aren't the flashiest players, but when you look at why Michigan's been so successful on the defensive side of the ball, it's a lot has to do with these kind of guys, right? A Jalen Harrell, who is not necessarily lighting up the stat sheet, but in terms of playing the run, Jalen Harrell is one of the best on Michigan in terms of playing that run, stopping the run, being a force and taking on blocks. Mikey Morris, that was primarily his role until last year where he kind of blossomed into an all Big Ten pass rusher. And I see a lot with what Dominic Nichols could bring, because what you're going to see when we fire up the film is a guy that has long arms, can use his arms to get on tackles, but very, very powerful as well. Let's fire it up because, again, lots to like about what Dominic Nichols brings to the table. You've seen him rush off the edge, and he's a guy that gets right into a tackle, doesn't stand a chance, and he's a good athlete in space as well, Dominic Nichols. He's a guy. I wonder if Ben Herbert wants to put him on weight, because when you remember Mike Morris got up to 285, 290 and played a lot on the inside as well. Dominic Nichols has a phenomenal motor, and he goes right through tackles, and he can use his length a little bit. And in terms of being a polished pass rusher, that's there as well. A lot to like. And again, using a little inside move there as well. He's very, very physical, kind of a game wrecker. And you're going to see him use that length when it comes to stopping the run as well. Good athlete in space. Checks off a lot of the boxes that you want in an edge rusher. But the thing I like the most is just how he gets downhill, goes right through tackles, and gets to the quarterback. Very good in the run game as well. See beating a block, making a tackle for a loss. Again, not the flashiest guy. He's not going to be a combine warrior. But when it comes to being productive and being a part of a very good defense where we preach play your 111, right? If everyone does their job, that Michigan defense is on fire. Like that's kind of what Dominic Nichols brings to the table. Again, I'm a big fan of what Michigan's doing, and I want to take us to the class that we have and talk a little bit about the edge position and talk a little bit about what other position groups I'd like to see Michigan address in this class. We got two edge guys set, and we have some like swing guys, you know what I mean? Like a Gerard Smith could play inside, could play outside. I think you could say very similar thing for a guy like Ted Hammond. Devin Baxter, he's the other edge guy we have in this class, much more of a twitchier, bendier guy. And we've had guys who can do a little bit of both, right? David Ajabo was much more of that twitchier edge rusher who's going to win outside. And then you had a guy like Mikey Morris who kind of wins right through tackles with just heavy, heavy hands. And then when you get that rare blend of guys who can do both, like Aiden Hutchinson, that's when you hit on the All-Americans. But I think it's important to have kind of a diverse skill set. Michigan likes to play a lot of, I would say, versatile defense, right? You're going to see a lot of different looks, a lot of the defensive linemen, like a guy like Mike Morris or Chris Jenkins, moves around, right? Plays inside, plays outside. Having guys who can do and play certain roles, or even like a guy like Yabi Oki, who's transferred out to Charlotte, but was not a guy that was dominant in the run game. And that was kind of Jalen Harrell's spot. But when it was 3rd and 8 and you needed kind of a longer, bendier guy to get after the passer, like a Devin Baxter could be, then you bring in Devin Baxter. So having guys at that edge position that can do some different things and thrive in different scenarios, I do think is important. And so that's our second edge guy. And I want to talk about who else are we adding to this edge group and who's been on campus and who are we trending for, right? Gerard Smith, you see, he's also on a visit with his twin brother, Jacob Smith, who's also a top 250 national dude. Much more of the longer, twitchier version of an edge rusher. Jacob Smith's another guy that I think would join Michigan's class. And you're starting to feel pretty good about what this edge position and specifically that defensive line is going to be looking like. You get Gerard Smith, who can kind of do a little bit of both. You have Jacob Smith and Devin Baxter, who are more of the twitchier guys who are going to win outside of tackles. And then you get a guy like Dominic Nichols, who I think is much more of a, I'm gonna put my hands on a tackle, go right through a tackle. I'm gonna hold up on leverage in the run game. And I like what Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter are doing on this defensive line in terms of getting guys that just can do a lot of different things. And again, they might not be the flashiest ranks according to 24/7, but Jim Harbaugh has shown that proven recipe of I'm going to do my own talent evaluation. Jim Harbaugh in the scouting department kind of does they do their own thing in terms of talent eval and what guys are going to fit the scheme, fit the program, and fit the culture. And it's really hard to argue with what Jim is doing on the recruiting trail. Now, a couple positions that I don't know if I'd say concerned, but you want to start seeing getting some guys in the program. It's that cornerback spot, right? Bryce West commits to Ohio State. He was Michigan's kind of top priority at that cornerback spot. You got a couple guys, right? And these three are probably the ones you're talking about. Aaron Scott will probably get a decision early mid-July on him. He's probably the top guy that Michigan is going to continue to go after. That would be massive because you look at this 2024 class, we don't have a cornerback, right? And Aaron Scott, considered an Ohio State lean, it sounds like Jacob Oden and Steve Clinkscale making some headway with Aaron Scott. But if we miss on Aaron Scott and he ends up going to Ohio State, these guys kind of become a top priority for Michigan, right? Terrion Nichols from Cincinnati, Ohio. I would feel really good about Michigan if they wanted to turn up the heat on a guy like him. Jameer Grimsley, though, kind of a guy that's not really been talked about in terms of the Michigan fan base and that cornerback spot. He took an official visit. A lot to like about his game. One, you see the length, right? 6'3", 185. He's from Tampa Catholic in Florida. That's where Steve Clinkscale does his recruiting. I like his game a lot. He's got track speed and length and ball skills, and that's pretty much the trifecta in terms of what you're looking for a cornerback. You got to have a guy that can run with the fast wide receivers, especially when you're trying to win that game late in November against Ohio State, and you got to have the length and size, right? When you're dealing with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. or some of those other elite wide receivers that Ohio State's going to have the next couple of years, you got to have the personnel at that cornerback spot to match up. And you look back at Michigan and why we might have struggled in that rivalry game. A lot of it had to do with just when we played man coverage under Tom Brown, we just did not have the cornerbacks that could match up with some of those elite wide receivers. Jameer Grimsley is a guy that I think would have that athleticism and length to certainly do so. Now, I do want to just talk slightly about Gatlin Bear, who is probably another top commodity for Michigan, especially in terms of getting that explosiveness in the offense. Like, this Michigan offense has been a blast to watch in terms of we're going to play 2 tight end sets, 12 personnel, we're going to run the football, and we're going to be a physical team. I love that. But when you can establish the run, you got to start attacking teams vertically. When teams like Ohio State want to load the box up, you have to be able to go off play action and have the personnel at the wide receiver position to stretch the field. Gatlin Bear, I'm sure many Michigan fans are familiar with him. Faster, you remember Nick Harbaugh from the 2023 class ran a 10.15. Gatlin Bear, 6'2", 180, a 10.12 100-meter dash time. Legit the fastest player in this class. He's from Idaho, which you love the connection with Colson Loveland also coming from Idaho. He might be a guy that if Michigan can kind of put it together in 2023 in terms of attacking down the field vertically, Gatlin Bear, who does have to not sit out 2 years, but he goes on that mission trip after he graduates high school, he would be a guy that looking at Michigan saying, all right, Michigan's starting to attack the field a little bit more vertically. I could see myself succeeding in that offense. Now, scrolling down the list and talking about some other guys to fill out this class, Michael Uni seems to be that last offensive line prospect that we're going to be looking at, 6'7", 290, like just a special build. Some of the other guys that were on campus, Jeremiah Beasley, probably going to be that last linebacker we're going to want to take. And after the tough loss with Aaron Childs, I would think that Chris Partridge and that defensive staff are going to really turn up the heat on Jeremiah Beasley, who I believe commits at the end of the month in terms of locking up that last linebacker spot. And once you get Jeremiah Beasley, you get a couple cornerbacks, and I think you're starting to feel really good about where this Michigan class stands in terms of the depth, right? You have your quarterback, you have your running backs, you have a dominant offensive line, some really talented dudes on the defensive line that can do a lot of different things. Now it's start checking off those boxes at the wide receiver spot. So a guy like Jordan Shipp joining the class, Gatlin Bear joining the class. Then you feel like this Michigan class is kind of complete. And again, I don't like to evaluate Jim's recruiting based on just the numbers and stars, because Jim's a guy that he doesn't – I would be surprised if Jim even looks at 24/7 Sports evals on these guys. I think he's just doing his own thing with his own scouting department, watching the film, getting these players on campus, saying, all right, that guy has a good fit from not only a physical standpoint of he's going to be able to play in our scheme and be successful, but also like a culture standpoint. Because you see the Texas A&M, for example, in that 2022 class, had the number one class in the country, the number one class 24/7 Sports has ever graded out. But a lot of it just seemed to be, we're going to get a ton of really good athletes on it and try to figure it out. And what happened? Half of those guys are already in the transfer portal, not playing for Texas A&M. So getting guys who are going to stick with Michigan, be there for 4 or 5 years, develop, that's kind of the recipe for Michigan. And again, it's not going to be flashy all the time like Ohio State or like Georgia, but it does seem to be working. The process seems to be working, and Michigan continues to get better, not only from the play on the field, but you're feeling really good about where this depth chart stands, not only in 2023, but the future for Michigan. So another really big pickup for Dominic Nichols. Again, a guy that just a ton of power in his hands, really good length, and Twitter's not going to go nuts about it, but a very nice pickup for Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. Again, wanted to keep it short, but appreciate the Michigan fans rocking with the fellas as usual. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.